Iowa's News Now Sports has your all-access pass to all things Hawkeyes. This is Eye on the Hawks.
Welcome to Eye on the Hawks. I'm producer Mike Howell, starting the show from Cedar Rapids in our studio, and I'm joined with anchors and co-hosts Mitch Fick and Owen Sebring out at Nissan Stadium in Nashville after Iowa's 27-24 loss, the same to Missouri, the same exact score as it was about 15 years ago, or 14 years ago, I should say, when Missouri and Iowa played in the Insight Bowl back in 2010. Guys, you are obviously still live down on the field, breaking down Iowa's loss. Instant reaction from the players and everyone. How does it feel?
Stuff away if you can't hear it. It's weird. Like you said, 14 years and 2 days after Iowa wins against Missouri. That's a helicopter going over for those that aren't watching the stream. In the Insight Bowl, to go to 8-5 and finish that season 8-5, they lose to Missouri in the Music City Bowl, 27-24, same score, to fall to 8-5. Like poetry, whatever echoes you want to talk about. If you want to talk about George Lucas saying episodes need to rhyme, it just it felt weird, but a very familiar story. Not just because of that, but talk about a tale of two halves again.
I was telling Mark Woodley, our colleague, that the amount of times that media has referenced the tale of two halves this season, it's just infinite at this point. I mean, it's almost poetic as well.
It's been the only consistent thing.
Yeah, truly. It's poetic that this season that's been the storyline for so many Iowa games this season. That again is a tale of two halves that ends their season in a loss here in the bowl game, and we talked about kind of blown leads this season. I mean, we're going to get into those stats in a little bit, but their third loss this season after giving up a double-digit advantage, and that's kind of what Kirk talked about after the game. Just, again, how well Iowa used to be with a double-digit lead and how much they've struggled in that realm this year.
Getting a game like that, then you're going to have to come up with some stops, too, if the offense isn't doing it. And conversely, if we're struggling defensively, it sure helps if you move the ball and get some points. And we didn't do that well, either of those well enough today. So, every day is a different discussion. But, that's certainly if we want to be a 10-win team or 11-win team like our opponent, you got to do a better job in those. And certainly when you got a lead, and I think there was a stat earlier I read in the year that was kind of unbelievable. When we had even a 7-point lead, I think it was. Our record's pretty damn good, but we kind of squelch that one, unfortunately. So.
Back here on Eye on the Hawks, and that was Kirk Ferentz talking about, I don't have the stat in front of me. Maybe I know Mitch is our stat guy. Maybe he has it. He's just always good with those. The stat, if they have a 7 or 8 point lead in a game, the record was insane.
I've got it for you. Thanks for watching the 6, Mike. The stat was between 2015 and 2023, Iowa at any point, if they led at 8 or more in a game, 71-2. They've ended 2024 in that scenario with a 6-3 record. So after winning 71-73, they lose 3 of 9. It's just that there's a lot of factors to it, certainly, but It feels just like the things Iowa used to hang their hat on, they're missing the hook, so to speak. The QB sneak is such a foundational play for Iowa.
Yep.
Doesn't get it done tonight. And, we can talk about the defense stuff again. Brady Cook's a great quarterback and went out a hero for the Tigers. Hats off to him. It's just those little things that we're so used to with Iowa football.
Yeah.
We haven't seen them at least consistently this year, which again is the title of the yearbook for it.
Yeah, and if anybody needs a reminder, those 3 losses now are Iowa State, UCLA, and now Mizzou have been games where they've led by 10 points or more and ended up giving up those leads. And the UCLA game was maybe the most excusable because Brendan Sullivan went out. They had Jackson Stratton. They were trying to deal with him for the second half. I mean, in his first real-life snaps. So that one, at least you kind of understand what happened. But as Iowa State and Mizzou just kind of I don't know if you want to call it a collapse in the second half, but the defense gives up maybe some points, maybe some plays that they're not traditionally going to give up. The secondary obviously was an issue for this entire game today for Iowa. And then no second half touchdowns, only 3 second half points for Iowa. This is the 3rd straight year they've gone in their bowl game and not scored a touchdown in the second half. Of course, they got shut out last year against Tennessee. The year before in this same Music City Bowl, they had a 21-0 lead at halftime and then got shut out in the second half of that game as well.
That one, of course, a little happier ending there. We'll take that with an 8-5 finish there to the 2022 season as well. It's a lot, again, things you're not used to seeing with Iowa. A lot of mistakes, missteps. In that second half, they were moving the ball well, particularly on the ground. Jazz had some great runs. Terrell Washington Jr., first career touchdown, and also had a really nice play after Brendan had taken a sack to make it a 2nd and 23. He pulls off a little scamper for 19 yards and made that 3rd and 4 a little more manageable. You wonder why all of a sudden. I think it was on that one, Mike. You'll have to remind me if that was that they went empty set on that 3rd and 4 before the sneak, right? Or am I convoluting and putting a couple different drives together?
Sorry, I got a producer talk to me right now. We might have some audio issues, and then right now, if you're watching it, I know there is a slight delay. But we're going to keep going.
For those who are listening to this after the fact, there's a lot. We're in the stadium. They're tearing it down. There's a helicopter going over. Mike's doing half a dozen things. This will not be the most polished product. Maybe should have led with that off the top, but we're going to power through. It's just what you got to do.
Yeah, I'd be curious, Mike, from your end. I mean, we've talked about some of the things that went wrong in terms of a blown lead, of course, only 3 second half points, getting stuffed on that last QB sneak. Anything else from you, Mike, that stuck out as something that went wrong tonight for the Hawkeyes?
What went wrong? Yeah, I mean, when you look at the first half, and Brendan Sullivan, who played just, I thought a magnificent first half, and I think started like 6 for 6. You know, his first incompletion didn't come until the second quarter. It was just you had a lot of encouragement, not just for this bowl game, but for the second for next season, really, when he's going to take over. One thing I will say in that second half, it makes you wonder if, you know, most of what the success led to was just, you know, when they talk about scripting those plays. I don't know if Mizzou made a lot of adjustments on the defensive side of the ball that kind of, you know, forced Brendan kind of to get pass rush happy. The pass rush for Missouri seemed to hit in that second half a little more. He had to get the ball out quicker, didn't have the ability to get to the edges. And that's one thing that we know is a concern, is if you can't get that quick read or that quick rush the ball to the edge, because they had a spy on him late in the game, how's this offense going to move? And, you know, I think that's something that went wrong, is just you couldn't sustain those drives, and to score 3 points in the second half, it definitely was disappointing.
And you can look to some of the things that they were missing without. I mean, obviously, Jamari Harris not in this game. Obviously, Cohen Entringer, he was injured, so he wasn't playing in this game. Kyler Fisher, he was ineligible to play tonight, and so they were doing without a lot of their defensive pieces that normally maybe would help in that secondary role, but still uncharacteristic out of that Hawkeye defense.
We wanted to talk about Brendan real quick, and I know we're going to hear from him in a little bit. The constant that we've heard from Ferentz and maybe Coach Lester a little bit, they're moving ladders now, if you're wondering what the ambiance is. He's a great competitor, and it's one of his greatest strengths, and it can also hinder him quite a bit. Holding on to that ball, trying to extend the play and get outside, either run or find a pass. You know, did it on that pick, trying to find Rees on the sideline, and number 2 for Missouri steps in and makes a heck of a play on it. Really great play. You know, rolling out and taking a sack, and it happened a couple times there. And, you know, trouble with the snap. I don't know if that was a new center, but a couple fumbled snap there. So as great as he was in the first half, and that Seneca Wallace-esque scramble after a fumbled snap, as incredible a play as you'll ever see. Even though he didn't make it in, that's as good as that run that Seneca had, I think, against Texas Tech on a TBS game 20-some years ago. I mean, it's exactly what you think of. But then you see the stuff that reared its head against UCLA, where it's, man, we know you're good. We know you've got a special skill set that an Iowa quarterback hasn't had in a while. You got to know when to take the L in the play, so to speak. Throw it away. Don't do the dumb thing, or don't be afraid to just get out of the play. And that was the really tough part there in the second half. As the run game was working really well, you wanted to see a little more consistency. But again, that's the theme there.
Yeah, and you do have to say that for a guy like Brendan, who had such a good first half, I don't know if maybe he's forcing something. He knew going into this game that this was kind of an audition for next year. That's what the coaches even talked about, that, you know, they have Hank Brown coming in, they've got Jimmy Sullivan coming in, now they've got Brendan Sullivan coming back, and so he knows that this game was working functionally as an audition for the 2025 season and what he can prove. First half looked great. He definitely looks like QB1 next year. And second half, I don't know if he wanted to come out and prove himself, really finish that point even further. And that was kind of what we asked Brendan about after the game, whether or not he felt like this performance that he put on tonight was something that secured his spot as QB1, potentially going into the spring at least.
I showed strides in the passing game, but obviously turning the ball over is something you can't do. So definitely going to learn from this film and just use it for that competition this year.
Do you feel like you at least put yourself in a place where you showed, like, hey, I can be QB1 of this team, I can lead this team and score points for the squad?
100%. I think I put a solid game on display. Obviously not the best game I've played, but I definitely put some good plays and then a good performance out there to take a good step and to compete for this job next year.
Brendan Sullivan, guys, you know, he said in the soundbite he thinks that he did enough to get, you know, move forward as the QB1 today and possibly into the future. And I want to pick your brains real quick. Do you think that, or how do you feel about that QB1 position moving forward into next? I know there's going to be a lot of competition with Hank Brown.
It's a cart.
Yeah, with Hank Brown, and you know, if they do get another quarterback in the portal, which you know, some people think they may get, but you know, in that first half you saw bright spots, and then you saw, you know, a dark spot that, you know, led to Missouri points in the fourth quarter.
I don't think you know any more about the quarterback competition than you did at the start of the game. You've got a guy who can make fantastic plays and can lead that shot to Ostrenga was a dot, as the kids say, and a few other nice plays there. But then you saw the pick, you saw a couple sacks, you saw fumbled snaps, and again, you've got a different center in there, and that's a factor and a variable certainly, but you kind of got more of the same. You got a kid that can change the game in a positive way and can change it in a tough spot as well. So I think Iowa just knows they've got a guy that still has potential with 1 year left. And you've got Hank Brown and you've got Jimmy Sullivan, you've got Jackson Stratton, and you're wondering if anybody else comes in as we have a helicopter coming back over once again.
Man, how many planes are going to fly by tonight,
I'm
huh?
still a fan of Brendan. I do really like his. Sorry, say that again.
How many planes are going to fly over the stadium today? That's kind of wild.
Oh yeah,
Well, they're helicopters.
Oh,
You
okay.
want planes to come out to our hotel.
I was just going to say that I still am a fan of Sullivan, and I do think that with a full offseason under his belt, that he could be the guy. And I would say that I would plan on him being the guy going forward, unless Hank Brown comes out and just really sets the world on fire. And, you know, when we see that spring practice, if he really looks like dynamite out there, then he's the guy. I mean, as we were sitting in a Waffle House yesterday, we were talking about, you know, would Mark Gronowski come over and take a visit to Iowa, a game where he's actually played a game before. So I don't know. It depends on what they add in the portal, but right now I do like Brendan as a guy, and if he can just clean up, you know, a few of those little things where he's trying to be too aggressive out there, maybe trying again to impress or to prove himself, and if he knows that QB1 is his job, then I would have a little bit more faith in him. But I don't know. What do you think, Mike?
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I remember those first two drives. He made a ton of excellent throws. That first throw to Ostrenga was a pretty ball, just dropped in there. Nice touch, perfect pass. That I believe it was third down. Maybe it was third down, maybe it was second. That slant that he had to set up the first touchdown. Very accurate throw, put it somewhere where only his guy could catch it. But then again, you know, so in that first half at halftime, I'm like, okay, we've got a player, right? And it's a little concerning that it took a step back in the first half or in the second half. But you know, I think when you take a step back and you look at what Iowa has in that room now compared to what they had last year, I think it's a huge improvement. Now, will that satisfy all the fans? I'm not sure. If you can add that Gronkowski from South Dakota State, I think if you get as much competition as you can, it's always a positive. But whether or not you get him or not, it's 10 times better than what we saw heading into last spring. Last spring, 2 quarterbacks were Deacon Hill and Marco Linez, the 1 and 2, who Linez is now out of the program. Deacon was out of the program after spring ball. So you have to consider that Sullivan came in August. This is the cleanest he's looked. This is the most he's been getting those number 1 reps from bowl practice. Those 2 weeks, it seemed to really help. And you just wonder, can he take that leap forward? And I guess we'll have to wait and see.
And not that you want to give a total excuse for a lot of those things, but again, this offense was doing without Caleb Johnson. What does this offense look like if Sullivan's in there and Caleb Johnson is in there? You never know. If he's got his normal center and Logan Jones, a few of those snaps look a little bit different. So there were some things that could have gone differently if they were a fully staffed offense. I was really surprised when Mitch just showed me some of the rushing stats from tonight. That Kamari Moulton, 96 yards and a touchdown. Jazz Patterson had 74 yards, and T.J. Washington with his first.
He had reception. You were surprised by those numbers?
I think that after the game, I guess I just did not see. I know Kamari had his one long run. I didn't think the Jazz would have had 74 yards. Maybe I missed something, but that seems like an 8.2 yards per carry. That surprised me that was what Jazz put up tonight. I mean, they both look good out there and definitely going to be competitive for what happens next year, but I did not expect that many yards, 166 rushing yards out of the team tonight.
Yeah, I think you've got to be encouraged for those running backs. And I know Caleb was out, and if Caleb was in, that might have made a difference in the game. But again, if Luther Burden's in, that probably has a major impact too. So, kudos to Kamari and Jazz and TJ for making that. One of the concerning things too, if we stick around with what went wrong, was the secondary. Man, it seemed like they ran a little man-to-man. I don't know if that was just a curveball. For Iowa did, that most times you see him play zone, but I did see a lot of man. It seemed like X just did not have the greatest day, had those 2 penalties. One was taken back. Deshaun Lee got picked on a little bit by Weiss, and, it just makes you have some questions going into next year, but they're young guys. I'm sure they've seen this before, and I guess, is that a concern for you guys, just the secondary that had a lot of, in the back end experience, but just didn't quite, or was it just, SEC team who has some good receivers on the back, a very experienced quarterback? Was it more of that?
I think it was all of that, right? Again, Brady Cook is as good a quarterback as Iowa's played all season. He hasn't had the most stellar 2024, especially compared to what he has done, but guy finishes his senior season 11 touchdowns, 2 picks, and hasn't thrown a pick. He had 1 all SEC play, so he's had 1 in I think his last 10 games as a college player. I mean, he doesn't make mistakes and threw some absolute dots. Now you had an underexperienced, it's still growing defensive secondary, particularly at cornerback. We've seen a lot of Deshaun. We're seeing more and more of TJ Hall. Cohen Endringer's not in there. It's a little bit of everything. You just had some opportunities for guys to get out there. Zach Lutmer was out there a few times and was in that zone and had guys catch balls. It's a little bit of everything, and I don't know if I'm concerned because they're youthful, but wouldn't be shocked if a defensive back came in out of the portal as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that X certainly has some things to figure out by next year. I mean, obviously, the last time we were at the Music City Bowl, X, you kind of thought that was his breakout performance. He had that pick 6 against Kentucky, and tonight he had the personal foul on him and just was not his best performance. He got yanked from that game for a while, and so it kind of depends on what he brings back next season, how much of a drive he has to finish his Hawkeye career strong. He has a lot of potential. He's had a lot of potential his entire career, but today he didn't have it, and neither did the rest of that secondary. It's one of those rare seasons that I feel like there are a lot of question marks surrounding the defense to start the next season. I mean, we've had so many assurances the last handful of years. We're not used to this, and so that's why we've obviously talked a lot about what they might add from the portal at either linebacker or in the secondary.
I think linebacker will be fine. You've got your three heir apparents, I guess, and you saw a lot of Jackson Retroth today. I'm sure you're going to see Jaden Harrell quite a bit, particularly in that Mike spot. Carson Shaw Mizzou, those first two kickoff returns, learned real quick, don't return the kickoffs, and he had one of those big hits as well. So I think the linebackers are set. You're going to have some experience there, guys who have played a lot of special teams. That secondary does feel like it's ripe for the portal, though. And again, the good thing is you're seeing so many guys on the D-line coming back as well. A lot of experience there. Kind of a quiet day for them, aside from Deontay Craig, 2 sacks in his final game as a Hawkeye, 15 sacks in his career, and him and Jay Higgins got to play together one more time after all their childhood memories back in Indy. I know Jay talked about that when you talked to him.
Yeah, and I know we kind of got to get things wrapped up here pretty soon. We've got batteries running low. Me and Mitch have to get some things finished up for the next show. But any final thoughts? First off from you, Mike, any final thoughts as we kind of wrap things up?
Yeah, one final thought, too, when we're talking about that secondary and those linebackers. Yeah, it seems like Phil Parker is set with the linebackers he's had. I think he was directly asked yesterday if he was going to go out in the portal, and he seemed pretty confident. So that's a good sign. Liking your linebackers and then performing, that's one thing, but I'm going to trust Phil Parker. He's a great coach. When you're looking at next year and you're when I'm talking about concern about the secondary, you just remember you have Oregon on the schedule, Indiana, Penn State with Drew Aller, and Rocco Becht, a lot of experienced quarterbacks there, a lot of open field. So that's one thing that you're going to have to deal with next season, but there's a lot of time to figure that out. The one thing I'll say about the end of the season is, man, a year ago, not today, but a year ago when we were talking about the future, I think I'd be a little surprised to know that this Iowa team, even though preseason I said 8 wins could be the floor, that this team with all those starters coming back, little disappointing season that we ended at 8-5 with a bowl loss. I don't think when's the last bowl they won? I think was it 2 years ago at the Music City Bowl. So 8 wins, nothing to sneeze at. Still winning season, not a bad season nonetheless, but you kind of expected a little more from this team. But, I do think there are, positives moving into the offseason in what should be a really tough season next year, at least schedule-wise.
Yeah, and I know Jay Higgins, obviously, he's the one main senior that we kind of say goodbye to as a guy who really built a legacy over the last 2 years and what he has done, what he's capable of, and what any linebacker player is capable of. And before we did wrap up, I just wanted to hear from his soundbite as he was asked about kind of what happens next, what's next for him as he graduates from Iowa.
Castro told me that I'm currently unemployed. And that is a little scary because I'm no longer a college student and I do not have a job. And so rent is still due at the first of the month, guys. So real world is here, like I was saying. So it's a wake up. I'm in the real world now. Just try to go feed my family, pay the bills.
Jay Higgins making a joke about having to feed his family, rent's still due. I think he'll be fine come April or May, whenever the draft is. He'll find a new home and sign a pretty good contract there. But it is sad to see him go. He etched his name in Hawkeye lore as staying behind Jack Campbell, coming in and just getting all the tackles he had last year and this year. I think he'll go down as one of the fan favorite Hawkeyes, one of those all-timers.
Yeah, and it sounds like doesn't have a lot of downtime. He's going to Dallas, I think, the first of the year and starting to train for the NFL. And so many other guys, we heard Quinn Schulte's off to Denver, and it's going to be a quick farewell for a lot of these guys because you have so many 5th and 6th year guys that have to turn around now and start training for the next chapter. And we'll catch up with them on their pro day whenever that is in Iowa City. Yeah, just not a lot of time to say goodbye to these guys who have spent maybe 4, 5, 6 years together. There's just a very brief time where they get a chance to kind of say their farewells. So, I don't know, Mitch, as we wrap up, anything else you want to add from here in Nashville? We had the perfect way out. You said, as they said their farewells, and I was going to say, and we'll say our farewells before the next helicopter or cart or banging loud thing comes along. Hey, we saw some great memories in 2024, took some tough losses. That's just kind of how life goes, right? As old coach once said, that's football, and that can be really analogous for life. So we've had a good run. It's been a good time in Nashville, aside from the final score. Had some great first half highlights. We'll start posting those here in a little bit as well, and it's been a nice little run here. We'll check back in on Eye on the Hawks. The basketball season's in full season. Sounds like Fran and the boys had a nice first half in their game. I'm not sure what the score is now, but we'll keep on trucking. That sun will come up tomorrow, and hopefully we'll be on the road when it does. Getting back to Eastern Iowa.
That's a wrap from us. Yeah, so for Mitch, I'm Owen. I'll say goodbye and wrap this thing up, and we'll see you soon here on Eye on the Hawks.